Friendly airstrike incoming.
Welcome back to another look at another new game that goes by the cheery name of World War 3. With the most recent Battlefield 5 arguably not doing as well as people might have hoped, is there space for something that seems to pay strong homage to those battlefields of yesteryear to sort of squeeze into that place? To be clear, World War 3 has nothing to do with the Battlefield series. It's not from an EA studio, it's from a Polish studio called the Farm 51. Very first impressions are good, there's nice detail to the world, sense of things happening, and that buzz is present the moment you spawn in. The HUD is pretty cluttered in default settings, but you learn to read it pretty fast, especially if you've played the likes of BF3 or 4. You learn pretty fast, the time to kill can be pretty short. It's not quite as fast as Insurgency or Battlefield's hardcore mode, it's much shorter than something like Dirty Bomb. It feels really in keeping with the style though, and there's no complaints from me in that regard. The map in this open weekend was limited to what I believe is their newest. It's called Polyarny. It's a snow map, as you can see, which always makes things look a bit special. There's obvious work gone into it as well. There's a nice feeling of place rather than it just being a map in a game. There's nice dressing to each building, and it feels really quite believable. The map plays well too. There's quite a lot of open ground to rush along and tight buildings to have really close quarter battles in. Curiously though, vehicles were present but not that sort of impactful, or at least people didn't seem to camp them or rush to get into them. They weren't the main focus by any means. I wish the open weekend hadn't just been on this map, to be honest, but if this is the standard that they're shooting for, and pun intended and no apology given, then the standard of this map feels pretty high from a studio the size of the Farm 51. The Wikipedia page says they have 100 plus employees in 2018 are working on multiple titles, so there can't be an absolute ton of people working on World War 3. And just as a quick aside, please do tap the thumb button in the direction of your general enjoyment for this video. It really does help me out, thank you. It's worth pointing out that with that feeling of Battlefield, the game does miss one of what would arguably be the pillars for that experience, and even in some of the titles that have been around for almost a decade now. Chief amongst those pillars that are missing for me is destruction. I don't know if this is a limitation of Unreal Engine 4, or perhaps just a mainstay of DICE's Frostbite engine, but we've become accustomed to buildings being destroyed as the battle rages in these style of games. Even Bad Company 2, aka the best Battlefield game ever made, don't at me, I know I'm right, which is almost a decade old, had not just significant destruction, but whole buildings falling down. I know there are other titles missing terrain deformation or walls that you can shatter, but somehow for World War 3, a game that pays so much homage to that older style of game, when it lacks that core feature, it feels a bit missing. Now, is that enough to spoil the game? No, not by a long way, but it is notable in its absence. The weapon handling feels pretty good too. There's a nice weight and punch to the feedback, perhaps slightly higher recoil than you might predict initially. As to the customization, well, let's talk about that more in a minute, because, well, you know, wow. Can you guess what I'm about to talk about next? Yes, I can actually hear your eyes rolling back in their sockets, but weapon sounds in a title positioned like this feel a bit lacking too. It's not bad per se, but that 20% more pop and drive that the popular War Tapes mode have in the Battlefield series feels missing by contrast here too. Some weapon sounds are better than others, and the gunfire in the environment sounds good, plus the actual weapon handling sounds are well done, I'll say that. There's some polish and gloss missing from the game also, perhaps more of an indicator as to the size of the development team. Stuff that doesn't matter too much, like UI elements not lining up properly, is eye-catching for a pedant like me, but more important is when those rougher edges interrupt those gameplay loops. It's perhaps also a nod to how much work goes into making those things like movement such a slick activity in titles like Battlefield 3, 4 and 5. You could imagine that Frostbite has also been developed over the years to play to those strengths. Perhaps replicating that experience in another engine is more work than you might initially imagine. Mantling or vaulting is core to that movement, and the feeling of using it in World War 3 just isn't quite there. It felt inconsistent, unreliable, and also featured a sort of odd snapping behavior. It was like mantling only wanted to be done at right angles to the object that you were moving over, So if you approached it at a slightly oblique angle, your whole direction was changed to be perpendicular to that object. Is it a massive issue? Again, no, but as with the lack of destruction, these features not delivering on the experience that you sort of take for granted starts to undermine the whole. At this point, I should say that WW3 is in early access currently. Things like movement improvements are on the roadmap for the future. But I believe that you should know how the product is now, and whether it's worth you to play it today. You shouldn't always buy something based off the promise of better down the road. I know that with Kickstarter and early access, that's not a particularly easy line to draw, but for a game that's basically out in early access, you should know how it is to play. I like the squad system a lot. It draws from those other titles to be sure, but the non-verbal waypoints and commands that squad leaders can easily perform can lead to real cohesion and cooperation even when you're not talking directly to each, person in the squad. There's nice reinforcement too of this in the form of rewards for following orders that can help motivate people, which is just a nice touch. There are more additions to the gameplay that aren't so traditional as well. Things like leaning on keybinds are so much better than the auto-lean feature you've seen in other titles, although yes, I am aware that Battlefield 5 recently got lean keys added. Leaning does slow the pace down a little, I think. There's more reason to camp the edge of some cover while you get your lean on, but pushing and rushing didn't feel too compromised by it. We should talk about weapon customization, cause, well, flippin' heck. I wasn't quite ready for the depth and development time that seemingly has gone into this side of the game. The customized menu is a smorgasbord of options, not just for weapons, but also visual unlocks for your whole soldier. Helmets, vests, all kinds of stuff. But the weapons themselves have exploded diagrams of all the components, skins that seemingly affect all those parts, plus a multitude of barrels and muzzles, and lower and side attachments, like additional grips or laser sights or magazine options or even body part changes, so you can swap out the actual trigger grip to go from like a standard to maybe like a pistol grip. It's comprehensive, it's bizarrely deep, and at times it feels totally unnecessary, like the sort of slow-mo fly past option. It's just, I've never seen that before in a game. But through all this, it does sell the title as something made by fans of this genre, and they know what people want in their game. If this level of fidelity can extend to all the other areas of the game, I could imagine the finished product being really quite a special title. There are some other higher level gameplay things that I didn't get a chance to interact with as they were disabled for this open period. Perhaps the most interesting was the strategic war map that promised to show the consequence of battles being fought. It says on their website, gain additional bonuses via the metagame and turn the tide of war. Each destroyed vehicle, every kill, every bullet fired, every achievement affects the big picture, presented on a constantly evolving interactive war map, eventually covering the entire planet. I'm interested to know what this feels like currently and where they want to see this ending up. Is it going to be like a series of matches across a number of maps, like say like a campaign? I'm not sure. The idea of progression outside of the match always appeals, so I'm happy to see them try and engage players in something larger than just shooting the next target. Yes, this title is a work in progress, so there are some UX or user experience things that do need looking at. Things like, I thought the game had crashed the first time I played it. Everything just locked up for a number of seconds, but that was just the map ending, but I didn't get any sort of warning of that. Things like not being able to enter the server from a server browser with a double click doesn't sound like much, but when you suddenly spy a free spot in a populated server that you really want to jump into, it's like a road hump that shouldn't be there in the first place because you can't just spam the button to get in. And yes, I know this sounds incredibly nitpicking, but I want to try and set the scene that some areas of this game feel more early access than others. So, is it worth playing? I came away almost surprised by how much I enjoyed playing World War III's weekend test. I'd seen some footage before and knew about the title a little bit, but the fundamentals of the weapon handling and the squad play kind of really drew me in. And once I saw the level of customization that they'd also done as well, I wanted to know what this game could be in the future. For me, for a free weekend to try out, it was absolutely worth my time, and would recommend you doing the same if you're a fan of any of the titles I've mentioned in this video. As this was a weekend looking at a specific map and at core gameplay, And as the game is currently priced at $28 in the US and £24 in the UK for an early access game, I feel like I can't quite make that judgment call at the moment. What I will say though is that I intend to keep an eye on World War III and see how it develops, what those additional parts of the game, the open weekend, didn't allow me to see are actually like. To that end, if the developers are watching and would like to provide me access, I mean a fixed period would be fine, I'd certainly be up for checking out more of this title. What do you think of World War III? Does this look like a title for you? Have you even played it before? And if so, what are your thoughts on its development and how things are going? Would you like to see me cover more of this in the future? Let me know by leaving a comment below right now. I'll of course be reading every single one of them. If you enjoyed the video, please do tap the sub button, the thumb button, as it really does help me in growing the channel and continuing to make videos just like this one. Thanks so much for watching and all your support. I'll see you next time. Take care.
Получил, мудила!